Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Irama Kakraba Ampe, and I will be your host for today. Before I start, we are experiencing a little bit of a technical issue. So I'm seeing a lot of Barikisu Zawis in the participant list. So I would kindly like to ask that everyone checks how their name appears in the participants list and kindly change it accordingly to your name so that we can tell, particularly when we get to the Q&A session, who is asking the question and who is who. So if you kindly hover your mouse pointer over the names, you can see a button with three dots. When you click that, you should be able to change your name. Thank you very much. All right. So once again, welcome to the webinar. This is the SET perspective. Our topic for today is using impact assessment as a catalyst for sustainable development. Impact assessment is often treated as a regulatory checkbox for permitting, but we believe that its potential extends far beyond compliance. Also, when strategically applied, impact assessment can perform better design, project design, enhance stakeholder engagement, and overall contribute to long-term environmental and social sustainability. And so the purpose of this webinar is to really explore how impact assessment can serve as a catalyst for sustainable development. Now, before we get into the discussion for today, we would like to go through some basic housekeeping rules so that we can have a very nice and welcoming professional atmosphere to facilitate the discussion. And so we will kindly ask that everyone keeps their mics muted when not speaking, to sort of avoid a lot of interruptions and distractions as well. This will also maintain audio clarity for all participants. We will also like to invite you to use the chat function to, introduce yourself. You can say your name, the organizations you're from, and even the country that you're from, so that we can know, who is joining us today and how we can even interact with each other following the end of this webinar. Feel free to also put in your social media handles so that people can connect with you as well. Please also use the chat box to ask questions. We will be monitoring the chat box for questions. So as the discussion goes on, please put in any questions that come to you. And when it's time for the Q&A session, we will go through the questions that we have in the chat. We'll also give opportunity for participants to also ask their questions using the microphone as well. Please kindly note that this webinar is being recorded, and we will be making the recording available on our YouTube page following the webinar. Okay, so to delve into this topic, we have three very resourceful and very experienced professionals in the impact assessment space to help us to delve into the discussion. First, we have Mr. Yao Amoyawase, who is Executive Chairman at SET. We also have Mr. Kwabna Biduyebwa, who is a seasoned impact assessment professional, spending a lot of years as the Environmental Protection Agency. And we also have Mr. Kobina Okine, who is currently an environmental and social safeguard specialist at the World Bank. And so I'd like to give each of our esteemed panelists about 1 minute to please add some more to the brief introduction that I have done of them, starting with Mr. Amoyawose.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Irama. As Irama said, I am Yao Amoyawose of the Center for Environment and Health Research and Training, CET. And I have over 30 years experience in environmental assessment and management. I also happen to be a former director at the Environmental Protection Agency Ghana, now Environmental Protection Authority, where, of course, I helped to develop the national EIA procedures and the regulations that were enacted from the procedures. And I also led the maiden country EIA capacity building initiatives in Ghana, and a part-time lecturer also at KUNST, where I lectured in their master's program in environmental EIA and environmental law. I've prepared over, I've led in the preparation of over 200 environmental impact reports. Most of these funded by the World Bank and African Development Bank and others. I was also the president of the International Association for Impact Assessment. And this was from 2015 to 2016. And also the president of the Ghana affiliate of the IAIA from 2012 to 2017. And I am very pleased to be part of this important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amoyawose. We will also like to hear next from Mr. Bedu Yeboah. And before he comes, I would just like to mention that I'm also very privileged to be hosting our three panelists because two of them, one is my current boss, Mr. Amoyawose. Mr. Bedu Yeboah was my former boss during my time at the EPA. And Mr. Okine is also a very senior colleague. And so I'm sure that we will learn quite a lot from our three speakers today. So, Mr. Bedu Yeboah, over to you, please.
Okay, thank you, Rama. I'm happy to, be here this morning. I'm also happy that you are the host or the moderator for this particular webinar. As my name is Kwabena Bedu Yeboah. I have been in this field for quite a long time, close to 30 years. Mr. Amoyawose used to be my boss at the EPA. He mentioned the training in in environmental assessment. In fact, he led it. Sampon and myself supported him to do this so many years ago. So we've been in this business for quite a long time. I exited the agency about close to 3 years ago as director for environmental assessment and management, and now I'm involved in so many things. A number of training programs, number of currently, I'm supporting the EPA to review the environmental assessment regulation, like SIF 2, which hopefully will become law maybe by the close of next week. I've also been involved in development of so many models. We have developed models, training of safeguard officers, in collaboration with the World Bank, QNUST, JIMPA, and then an EPA. Now a freelance consultant. I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bedu Yeboah. Mr. Okine, please, we would like to hear from you. next. Thank you.
Thank you, Irama. So good morning to you all. Extremely excited to be joining my former boss and my former regulator, my trainer and my regulator. So looks like this is a family affair. So we're going to have a very, very interesting discussion. And I know that for the many who are spending time this morning to be with us, we're going to be enriching ourselves, and I know we're going to be sharing a lot of experiences. So as Irama said from the beginning, I am an environmental specialist at the World Bank. That is my role at the bank, but we are not defined by our rules. So I'm an environmental and social safeguards practitioner. And I do a little bit of the gender and inclusion and all of that. But of course, when you find yourself a job, they box you into one role. So that's what you do from the office. But we need to go beyond what we are boxed into. And as I said, I was trained by Mr. Amoya Osei. I worked with him for 8 years, from 2011 to 2018. And the experiences were great. It was through that process that I had opportunity to even coordinate a project in Sierra Leone, a huge project. I mean, that took about a year to complete, and then also had opportunity to collaborate with international firms such as Geneva and WSP. And there was this one we also did for an ESMF for the Ghana Railway Master, the Ghana Railway Framework. Just say menkai di ne kora. But the point is that we've done huge things, collaborated with a lot of international agencies, and by God's grace, we had opportunity to be the first substantive or full-time or dedicated environmental and social risks officer at CalBank, and moved on to support the Ministry of Finance to set up the Development Bank Ghana. While at Development Bank Ghana, I had opportunity to join the World Bank, and I quickly packed my baggages and I ran to the World Bank. So that's what I've been doing for some time now. So thank you for the opportunity. And Irama, you may have to remind those who joined later that their names still show as Barikisu Zawi. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Okan, for that. So yes, before we dig in, I'd like to kindly remind everyone we had a bit of a technical hitch with the meeting link. And so if your name is appearing as Barikisu Zawi, Barikisu is one of my colleagues here. We would ask that you kindly change your name so that we know who we have with us in the chat. And also feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know, your name, who you are, where you work, the country you're from. Please also feel free to put in your social media handles so that other participants can connect with you after the webinar. And so we will dive right in to the topic. The format of the webinar is going to be we pose a question, and then each of our panelists will spend a few minutes to just enlighten us from their perspective in regards to the question that has been posed. And so, how is impact assessment defined and understood across institutions and sectors? And how would you describe the core purpose and value of impact assessment? And to what extent is this understanding consistent among practitioners, regulators, and developers? And I think even among other players in the sector in your context. We will start with Mr. Amoya Osei, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Irama. Maybe we will go to the classical definition of impact assessment as a systematic assessment of the likely environmental and of course, if you like, social effects of any proposed action or investment and any measures proposed to mitigate the significant effects. In addition to enhancing the potential opportunities for sustainable outcomes. If you like, and also you're likely to add to promote sustainable development. Sustainable outcomes, sustainable development. I mean, basically the same thing. And the core purpose and value of impact assessment is one, to influence planning and decision-making. You see, and this is conceived in the context of inclusiveness. It's supposed to be an inclusive process where all stakeholders are brought on board to ensure the sustainability in the given development action. And the inclusiveness is very important as it relates to sustainability. Now, the understanding is generally consistent among key stakeholders and in the various jurisdictions. I must, however, include that there are pockets of misunderstanding on the scope of applicability. Some institutions in Ghana, for instance, think that the environmental assessment regulations, the LI 1652, is EPA's law, okay, as narrow as that. And therefore, this has little concern or little utility value for them and for their institutional actions. And I think this is the extent to which the impact assessment concept is prevented from achieving its full scope and benefit. I think I'll end it here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amoyawase, for that. Mr. Bediabwa, if you would like to kindly add to that.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to give some historical perspective to impact assessment before I give and then we'll look at what really is an impact, and then what is the impact assessment. Beyond permit, if you look at the Bible, Genesis 2:15, when God created the earth, the Lord placed the man in the Garden of Eden to cultivate it and then guard it. Genesis 2:15. That was the beginning of sustainability. So during creation, God knew that we have to utilize the world that has been given to us. And in doing so, there could be risk that will require management. So environmental assessment started from creation. Now, fast forward, around the late 1960s or mid 1960s, after the Second World War, when development actually was very rapid, the focus was only on economic development. And around the middle of 1960, the world realized that there was too much harm to our environment and that there was a need to do something to ensure that we safeguard the God-given environment. So the UN then decided in 1969 to organize an international forum to discuss how we can manage our environment. And in 1969 again, that was when the US government actually passed the Environmental Protection Act to protect. So that was the first law meant to protect our environment. So the Stockholm Conference in 1972 was the first conference on environment, which Ghana was part. So when God created the earth, the management of it in Genesis 2:15 wasn't meant for permitting. The essence was that whether permit or not, we have to safeguard the environment. So now it's all about how do we sustain creation, our earth. That is the bottom line. So this tool of environmental assessment came up. My understanding is that we are not focusing only on environmental impact assessment, it's impact assessment. So I would now like to look at what an impact is really. It's just a change. When you introduce an intervention into a system, there's the possibility of a change. And that change is what we refer to as impact in environmental assessment. So as Mr. Amuya defined earlier, it is a process, it's a tool. Environmental assessment, impact assessment is a tool that is used to identify and even to describe and then identify and then also to predict and evaluate environmental and social consequences of a proposed either policy, a plan, program, or a project. With policies, we are looking at strategic environmental assessment too. But when it comes to projects, then we are looking at environmental and social impact assessment. So it is a process that is meant to improve decision making. If that process will not lead to an improvement or sustainable decision making, then the assessment is not necessary. So this is done prior to any decision making. You have to undertake the assessment before a decision is taken. So in effect, if you are doing, if you are considering impact assessment, you should be thinking about how do you prevent the impact in the first place from happening. If you cannot prevent it from happening, how do you minimize it? If you cannot minimize, how do you offset or compensate for? These are the three cardinal hierarchies for mitigation. Okay, we call it the mitigation hierarchy, which is also very important in impact assessment. And there are a number of tools that can be used. You can use matrices, you can use overlays, networks, you can use GIS, modeling. Modeling is a very powerful tool in environmental assessment. And also, if stakeholder engagement, which is part of the impact assessment, is a tool that can be used for impact assessment. And let me also indicate that there are various assessment instruments, 4 of them for now. We have what we call the biophysical impact assessment, which was the earlier version when impact assessment started in the 70s. And then that considered air quality, water quality, soil, and those things, focusing mainly on what now we call the environment. And then there was this social impact assessment that later was added on. And then the integrated assessment, which we practice in Ghana. Integrated assessment considers the physical impact assessment, the social impact assessment, economic impact assessment. And then the last one I want to mention is the strategic environmental assessment, which is used for policies, plans, and programs. Okay. So basically, the purpose for impact assessment is to provide information for decision making and also to promote environmentally sound and sustainable development. Okay. So I'll leave it here for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bidu. I think you've given us quite a lot, adding on from where Mr. Amoya left off. So I think we've sort of gone through the history even of impact assessment, the types that we have, the purpose, also the working definition that we use in practice, and even going on to things around mitigation and so on and so forth. Mr. Okine, please, we want to get your perspective on the question as well. Thank you.
All right. So having had my trainer and my regulator speak to the matter, what more can I add? So let me basically try and for those who are first timers, or probably for those who are not for those on the line who are not very much into impact assessment and want to know about this. So let me just basically summarize what my bosses have said. So first of all, Mr. Moya talks about an iterative process. Now you can talk to consultants who have conducted impact assessment for over 50 projects, and they will tell you that sometimes if you don't understand what you're doing, the process might get boring. So what I seek to do is to tell you that we are more interested in the process than in the report. In any field, whatever assessment you do, whatever studies you do, you will do a report. So impact assessment is not so much about the report, even though the report is what helps us to understand what you've done, what you've gone through, and the level of the level of thinking that has gone into the work that has been done. Yes, the report is great. And so if you're a very good consultant, you can actually have a very good template. What changes will be the specifics, depending on what sector, what location, what others will call the value, the environmental component are, and stuff like that. So at the World Bank, we know that the principles cut across. In fact, the principles of impact assessment do not change depending on which sector or which institution you're looking at. So they cut across. So and it's an iterative process. I like the fact that both speakers have also spoken about the fact that it's to help us plan and make decisions. So if you've gone through that process and that process is not influencing your activity, you have not done an impact assessment. So I want to look at it from the non-technical way. If you go through an impact assessment process and your stakeholders have not been meaningfully engaged, you have not done an impact assessment, because there are different levels of engagement. And I know how sometimes people can do things to represent something. That is not impact assessment. Impact assessment is where you are empowering people to understand what the full details of a particular undertaking is and how these might impact on them, so that they rather than help you to even determine the significance of these impacts and these risks, and even sometimes they help you come up with solutions that are more feasible, and that probably would help fix a particular risk to a level that is acceptable. So impact assessment, basically an iterative process, um, helps us to make decisions and helps us to plan better. So that's where I would leave the summaries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Okan. So I think now it seems we are quite grounded in terms of what impact assessment is. We have set the scene. There's been some kind of theoretical um, description of what impact assessment is. Mr. Okan has tried to bring it down a bit into practice. And so we are going firmly on the ground into practice, impact assessment in practice. And so, from each of your experiences, how would you describe how impact assessment is currently conducted in Ghana? And if you could kindly share your observations on how it has been approached by various project proponents. Mr. Amoyose from the perspective of a practicing consultant, Mr. Bediebwa from the perspective of a regulator, although we know that you are no longer with the EPA as at now, but you can bring a lot of expertise from that perspective from your time there. And then Mr. Okine from the perspective of a development partner. We would like to start with Mr. Okine. Thank you.
No, I'm muted.
Please.
Okay. So now I'm unmuted. Thank you. So then it's been good. In fact, recently the bank had we work a lot with a lot of our stakeholders. We always engage in the EPA, Department of Factories Inspectorate, because when you get into the nitty-gritties, you realize that there are institutions without whom you cannot have a very effective impact assessment process. Okay, so we know the key institution will be our EPA, the Environmental Protection Authority. Every day it looks like I have to remind myself they are an authority and no more an agency. So, but we've realized that EPA yes, has a definition that goes beyond, I mean, has a definition of the environment that goes beyond just the biophysical that Mr. Kwabena Bediebo alluded to. They also talk about the social aspect and the rest. But over the years, we've had the social issues evolve, and we now have issues of gender and inclusion. We have issues of influx, how you managing influx of migrant workers. We have so many other social issues, child labor, and all those things that sometimes do not feature prominently. Not saying that they don't feature at all, but you don't see them featuring prominently in some of the impact assessment works that we do. So what we do is that we've tried to do a gap analysis of the industry. And so, yes, so we have a fair idea of how it's being practiced across the country. We know that within the sub-region, Ghana is quite ahead of a lot of countries. We are doing very well, not just the sub-region, actually across Africa. Our EPA has really led a very good fight in this industry of impact assessment, and we seem to be doing a lot of things well. In terms of where we have seen gaps or where we've seen some bit of weaknesses that we know we can, probably strengthen institutions, strengthen consultants, and help them overcome. I think one would be the process, as I spoke about initially. So when you go through some of the reports that come to us, you realize that there is no, I wouldn't say there is low effort to meaningfully engage project, stakeholders. Because sometimes it's easy to, indicate what somebody might think, what an institution might think, but the involvement must be meaningful, it must be transparent, it must, that we see the process as a process of accountability. So we tend to stress a lot more on the process that you're using than even the reporting. But of course, as I said initially, a report must come. So what we see is that there are consulting firms, there are consulting individuals who do a very good job. And if I were to name them, I probably would create problems. So I won't name them, but there are a good number of them who are doing very good work. We just think that there are a few who need to really understand, appreciate the process of having the information out there so that people can meaningfully improve upon the design and the rest. So we've had projects where we've had to change. What we usually do is that so basically just a small thing about how we develop our project. So we develop projects for government agencies, even though the beneficiaries may not just be government stakeholders, but private people as well. So there's an economic transformation project which we're doing with the Ministry of Trade and Industry, with the Ministry of Finance, but we are working through VCTF, we are working through GEA, we are working through NEIP. So who are your main beneficiaries of NEIP, GEA, VCTF? These are basically private businesses, SMEs. So a big chunk of the money actually goes to these private individuals or private businesses. So what we then seek to do is that whoever we are dealing with as a government agency, because you realize that sometimes there are some weaknesses at the government level. So once we see these weaknesses, what we do is to try and provide some, gap filling measures. We try to build those capacities. There are some government agencies where they would recruit private consultants to help, to help cover those gaps or help them, build on those little areas that they need to be working on. So in terms of the landscape, generally, I think that it is a great landscape. A lot of people are doing great things. There are a few weaknesses. We've discussed these weaknesses with our consultant and other agencies. And I think all those on this call who have been involved in some of these meetings would know about these. So specifically, I would say that it's been well practiced. and there's only so much room that we can have for improvement. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Okine. Mr. Amoyawase, would you kindly like to add to what Mr. Okine has said? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Irama. Yes, to follow up on what Kobina has expertly given. But I wish, okay, maybe I'll stray a little into Bedu's area by saying that impact assessment in Ghana is conducted based on the Environmental Assessment Regulations, the LI 1652. And of course, this is derived from the parent law, the Environmental Protection Agency Act 1995. Which has, of course, recently been amended as the Environmental Protection Act 2025. And these require EPA to ensure that development actions comply with the laid down EIA procedures. And of course, we know the procedures are the regulations, the LI 1652. Now, what clients do is to look for consultants to conduct the assessment and to prepare the necessary documentation for them. And of course, this is then submitted to the EPA. But I should say, in effect, what clients do or what consultants do and what clients expect is competent advice from the consultants on the level of assessment, and the consultants will do this through perusing the screening schedule, the Schedule 1, Schedule 2, and then the Schedule 5, and then provide guidance as to the level of assessment required. And in so doing, we'll also provide guidance on the kind of impacts that are encountered and discuss this with the client, the mitigation commitments that will be necessary, and the alternative considerations. And that is very, very important. And so these, if you like, are the key areas that the consultant will have to communicate and discuss with the client, so that the client understands the implications of the investment that he intends to make, the level of risks identified, and the cost of mitigation, and so on and so forth, and the alternatives, more importantly. And this is one area that perhaps we haven't placed enough emphasis on, the need for alternative considerations. And later in our discussions, I think we'll focus more on this. But rather unfortunately, impact assessment has come to be seen as a permit requirement. And that notion appears to be the preoccupation of the client. It is very, very unfortunate. And because of this, I doubt whether the planning and decision-making processes that are supposed to be the benefits to be derived from impact assessment are actually gotten, and whether the planning process, the decision-making processes are actually influenced to any serious extent in practice. And another serious omission is the fact that the various decision-making institutions sometimes are not actively involved in the process. As I indicated earlier, if an institution happens to view the EPA Act or the EA regulations as EPA's law, then they tend to, if you like, they tend to isolate themselves from the demands of the law and concentrate only on their narrow institutional mandates. And this is one big impediment in the way of realizing the actual benefits and the value that impact assessment is supposed to bring about. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amoyawase, for that contribution. Mr. Bedi-Yeboah, if you kindly like to wrap up for us on this question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I'm taking my two earlier speakers have actually dealt with this topic very well. But I would like to indicate that, as I said in my first presentation, in Ghana, the practice is that we use integrated impact assessment and also strategic environmental assessment. So basically, that is the main approach or the instrument that we use. But let me say that some institutions do what we call maybe they do they disintegrate some of these things into like social impact assessment, health impact assessment. Even some are doing fisheries impact assessment and what have you. But the common practice is that we do integrate it. And in Ghana, let me unfortunately ask Mr. Amir say, IA is not seen as a planning tool. It is mostly seen as permit driven. I'm doing it for permit because the law says I should get a permit. And there were some experiences when when I was with EPA. Sometimes you go for monitoring and the proponent will not even, we'll be looking for, if you ask for the permit, we'll be looking for the permit, we'll be pulling drawers. Those who are lucky to find it, you find that the very envelope that they took the permit, when they took the permit, they put in, the permit will still be in it maybe after 2 years or so. So it tells you that they don't even read to understand what they are supposed to do. So it's seen as just like permit driven, but it is a planning tool. But then, if you do it appropriately, you have to do environmental assessment before you design, because the outcome must or is likely to influence your engineering and then the design of the project. So, as a proponent, the proponent must always have in mind the project cycle. At what point, or what is the entry point for the impact assessment? So you have to look at when you at the project identification, when you conceive the idea that I want to have a particular project, what are the critical environmental issues that must be considered? During pre-feasibility study, you must consider environmental issues. The feasibility study itself stage, environmental issues must be considered. The design, as I said, the assessment is likely to influence your design, and then the engineering. And then during implementation, there are environmental issues. And then also even the decommission. So the project cycle will look at all of this in three groups or phases, like the identification, design, and then the engineering. Then also the project implementation, that's construction, and then the operation, and then the completion, and then the decommissioning of the project. And at each stage, one must be able to understand the implications of the project to the environment and vice versa, what the project will have on the environment will also have on the project. But there are sometimes proponents sometimes don't look at some of these things. Some start the process late. There are instances where a proponent will tell you that, okay, I went to the bank for loan, and the bank is demanding an environmental permit, and they have the impression that they just walk in and then pay pay for the permit and then take it away. But it is a whole process. We have said it's an administrative process. It's a whole process that you have to go through before you arrive at that decision making. So consultants who play the role of the proponents will have to ensure that they educate their clients to understand the importance of impact assessment and the benefits that it will bring to them, so that some of these things will be eliminated. And I think that I will end here for my other colleagues to come in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Widiabwa. I think we've heard quite a lot up to this point, and some of the things that our speakers have mentioned segues nicely into the next question, which is around gaps. Gaps in the impact assessment process, as it pertains to Ghana and even more broadly across Africa and even worldwide. I think Starch mentioned one on stakeholder engagement, and that the stakeholder engagement process seems to be quite lacking. A bit also in terms of institutional capacity. Mr. Bidiabwa mentioned, the understanding of impact assessment as a planning tool. Low understanding of impact assessment as a planning tool on the part of proponents. And then Mr. Amoyawase also mentioned, things around institutional mandates and how that is that sort of affects the impact assessment process. And so before we get into the question on gaps, I'm sort of exploring more on what these gaps are in terms of the process of impact assessment. I would just like to remind everyone that if your name is still appearing as Barikisu Zawi and you are not Barikisu Zawi, please kindly change your name to reflect. So if you just hover your mouse over your name, you should see a box with 3 dots. If you click that, you should be able to rename yourself. Also, if you have any question, kindly type out the question into the chat box. We will be monitoring the chat box as we go along, and when we get to the Q&A session, we will pose all the questions to the speakers. Alternatively, you can just note your question down, and when we get to the Q&A session, you can have the opportunity to raise your hand to ask the question directly to the speaker that you want to address your question. Okay, and so moving into the next bit about gaps. What are the gaps that you have observed in terms of the impact assessment process in Ghana? And we've mentioned quite a bit, but we would just like to really delve in to understand what these gaps are and what you would recommend that is done to sort of plug in the gaps to ensure an effective impact assessment process. Mr. Bediaba, we'll start with you on this one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes. As a former regulator, I presided over a review of most of these reports, and I can mention so many of these gaps. But the gaps, some are institutional, some are technical, and then some are financial. I also say that some also are as a result of maybe sometimes political interference. And then with respect to the PAPs, that's project affected persons, the understanding of the whole process, and then their vulnerability are very, very, these are some of the gaps that we identify. But let me focus on one key gap, that is with respect to scoping. My experience indicate that about 80% of the scoping that is done by either the proponent or the consultants, do not address properly what is supposed to be in the scoping. And this eventually affects the report. The scoping is simply meant to provide direction for the assessment. It is to give a focus to the impact assessment. Because in collecting data during impact assessment, you can collect so many, a lot of information that you need to present what is relevant. There are some reports that when you review, people will be talking about a report maybe in Osu, Dankwa area, where they'll be talking about flora and fauna. And there will be about a 10-page, 15-page write-up on flora and fauna. And you ask yourself, where in Osu can you find some of these things? So you have to present what is relevant, not what you think is relevant. And for each project, you have to, design the scoping for, it should be project specific. It's not a fit for all, a process. So one key gap is the scoping. But if you don't do this well, it is likely to affect the report. So let me say that when it comes to the regulator, the key gaps are institutional and then the technical capacity. Our regulators will require a lot of capacity building and training to be able to be on top of the job. I'm not saying that it is not there, but you see, environmental assessment is very progressive and dynamic. So there should be a continuous, engagement, a continuous training, okay? Maybe through seminars, workshops, and what have you. And then also, when it comes to the proponents, it's more of the technical and financial capacity. For example, if you have a project that will require modeling, they want to, because it's expensive to model, they don't want to do it, and then they will just do something to represent something. So when it comes to the proponents who technical and financial capacity, it's also a gap that needs to be. And then I mentioned earlier that with respect to the project affected persons, some perhaps are so vulnerable that they don't have a mouth, they can't speak, they can't defend themselves. And in here, sometimes the CSOs within the communities become their mouthpiece. They speak for them. So we need to ensure that we build the capacities of all these people, and then also, awareness creation within some of these communities where we have the vulnerable, pre-affected persons. To end, let me indicate that at the end of the day, the assessment will have to be presented to the regulator in the form of a report. So you must ask yourself whether the report you are presenting meets three critical things. One is whether it will help you, the proponent, to plan and design. The second one is the regulator, whether it will actually help the regulator to decide. And then the third one is the public, whether the public will read and understand your report. So every report that you, as a proponent or the consultant, is presenting or writing must be actionable by the proponent. And then also, it should be decision relevant with respect to the regulator, and then it should be user friendly by the proponent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bediabwa, for that. Mr. Okine, we would like to hear from you on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Irama, and thank you, Mr. Bediabwa, for that wonderful introduction. In fact, immediately he started veering into baseline. I said, I'm dead because this is what I want to talk about. But of course, there are so many things that we could do better in the art of the impact assessment that we do. In fact, my former boss, Mr. Moya, used to talk about it as an art, right? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it well, A-R-T. So there has to be some intentionality in what we do, not just to get things out of the way and get the permit, as we say. So that's how come this discussion is quite important. We're saying beyond the permit. And I think for all the interventions I've made so far, I have been sort of intentionally concentrating on consultations. And I'm doing that for a good reason, because on some of our projects, that project that are funded by the World Bank, we have seen the issue of unmet expectations. Now, this might be something that might be new to some people on the call, but for most practicing EIA people here, you would know about unmet expectations and how they can unmake projects. So you may have a very wonderful undertaking that has been designed and all of that, but the people who are you have contracted to go and lead these community entries and engage community members go saying things that we know the project cannot do. In fact, I've also had the opportunity to work with a commercial bank. So let me give you the perspective of businesses. Businesses are in businesses to do business. They are not in business to protect the environment. It just happens that they need to comply. So we are getting them to understand that by complying, they can actually even add more value to their operations. So we need to understand the perspective of business owners. So the idea is that if a business goes into a new area and it is doing business, it cannot be doing all the things that consultants go promising when they have not yet even been profitable, gotten to the stage where they can say they made some profit. How do you go doing all these wonderful things that have been promised by some consultant when we've not even made profit, when we are not even sure whether this is going to work? So I'm talking about consultations for a very good reason, unmet expectation. And I think about 10 years ago, while I was working with my former boss, we had opportunity to do a health impact assessment for Talo and the Jubilee partners in the 6 coastal districts of the Western region. So from Shamar through STMA to Agona to Elembele and Jomoro. I don't even remember which one comes first, whether Jomoro or Elembele, but I'm sure there are people on the call who know better. But every community, every fishing community we visited in each of these districts had a whole issue with unmet expectations. And it was difficult managing these expectations. They had been promised this, they had been promised that, they had been promised that. So how are we going to ensure that consultants at the beginning of projects don't go creating problems for business owners? Make sure that you are clearing the message that goes out. They may be the consultant, they may be the expert, but let's make sure that as business people who are eventually or ultimately responsible for what happens, let's make sure that we see a clear message the consultant is sending out. We are clearing that. And these are things that we learned whilst we were learning with, at my former consulting place. These are things that are standard international requirement, and that is what we apply at the World Bank. Proponent must have cleared. So we are always asking for your communication and visibility plan, just to be sure that whatever goes out there has already been cleared and checked by you before a consultant goes pushing something that is not really the case. Sometimes you just want to whet the appetite, get them to accept the project. But, we have what we call, why has the term even escaped me? It's a form of community acceptance, social license. Is that what we call it? Yeah. So there's a way of properly obtaining a social license. And the way to obtain that is not to go over promising, to go presenting the project as, the project that's going to solve everybody's problems. No. So I'm intentionally dwelling on this because I think that's something that we must all try and guard against, And I think that for me, let me try and shake some tables. I have a friend on the call in phone helped me to do my ISO 14001. He has this thing, he says, allow me to shake some tables. I think that any consultant would do, the success or the effectiveness of your consultation process is a personal integrity issue for me. If you go and you do anything other than what the project will do, for me, you are breaching some personal integrity stuff. So for me, that's what I would say the consultation. But let me just say a bit about the baseline quickly. I know my 3 minutes it was up a long time ago. Baseline is so important. So we've received reports. Maybe it's an agric project, or let's just say a construction project. So even though soil quality or soil assessment will be useful in both an agric and a construction project, the parameters you do will differ. So you don't do a baseline that covers, if it's a construction project, you don't do a baseline for me that covers soil. You need some bit of soil characteristics, but the soil characteristics you'll be looking at for maybe a building project or a road project will be maybe the erodibility of the soil. You are looking at those physical characteristics. You are looking at you are doing tests like the dynamic penetrometer cone testing to see the amount of to just gauge the how buildings on that site probably may be able to resist erodibility or that kind of thing, or something like that. The engineers will know better. There are things that are relevant based on what you are doing. So just to add on to what Mr. Bediye said, you don't do a whole baseline chapter. Sometimes takes about 40 pages. A whole baseline chapter takes 40 pages. And the sad thing is that having generated all this information, you don't see the information reflected in the assessment. You don't see any deliberate effort to pull aspects that are relevant for the analysis. Meanwhile, we've all said that in impact assessment, what you're doing is superimposing the project features on the existing baseline. So when you generate all this baseline information and you cannot use them, you haven't been very efficient. And I think some of these baseline things we do add to the cost for the proponent, and it's something we must guard against. Let's be sure what is necessary, what is important is what you do. And for you to do that, that's why a scoping report is very important. And then EPA would guide you in doing the things that are necessary and needful for any particular intervention within any particular sector. Thank you, and sorry for going beyond 3 minutes, Rama.
Thank you, Mr. Okai. That's okay. Okay, Mr. Amoya will say, please wrap this question up for us. Thank you.
Yes. The Bedu and Kobna have exhausted the issues so well. Bedu was talking about the institutional, lack of institutional collaboration and other things like that, and the technical aspects referring to scoping, and Kobna also hammered on it. I mean, scoping is a whole thing. It's so important in identifying the significant issues that the impact assessment must focus on. So if you don't get the scoping right, it's just beating about the bush. And then Bedu talked about the political interferences and interests, which is also a difficult area. Then the financial difficulties he mentioned, and then also mentioned community, the vulnerabilities, the voicelessness, and the poverty issues, which sometimes also influence what happens during consultation. And Kobna has, exhausted the issue about, the personal integrity issues that relate to consultations. And this is very important. And what I always say is that no consultations should take place when the client is not with the consultant. The client must be present in every consultation process that takes place. And this is very, very important. This is so that you don't go and make, unattainable promises just to get your way, out, and then you end up creating problems for the client. So this is very important. Now, the other challenge that I would add to what they have so been, ably presented is the interest in impact assessment, which is more focused on securing permits, you see, than the benefit of influencing planning and decision making, okay, planning and sustainability of project decisions. So that's another area of concern. Then the disconnect, the source of disconnect, I think Bedu mentioned this, is a capacity gap or lack of capacity in impact assessment. That is a very serious one. And perhaps that is the underlying problem that we must look at. And this is widespread and everywhere, and does not allow a proper appreciation of the value and the benefits of impact assessment. With that said, we do not get the value of impact assessment because of this absolute lack of knowledge. I would put it that way, blunt. I mean, everywhere there are gaps, knowledge gaps that must be filled. And so talking about effectiveness, to me, is only a mirage, because we seem to be missing a lot. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Amoyawase, for that. I think someone has also made a contribution in the chat. Aaron Asante Adai says, there needs to be more collaboration among state agencies that require the environmental permits as part of their approval processes, to also incorporate permit conditions into their planning process. And I think I agree with that. A lot of us will agree with that comment as well. I think even on the part of the businesses, sometimes it seems like there are so many permits from different regulatory bodies that you need to acquire, some of which are quite integrated. And so if all of that, the permitting processes can be aligned, I think businesses would really be happy about that. And so following from that, I would like to take one key action or reform from each of the speakers, one key action or reform that you believe is necessary to allow impact assessment to basically do its job of promoting sustainable development. Mr. Amoyawase, please, one key action or reform from you.
Oh, that is obvious. As I said, filling the capacity gaps. Because if you talk about lack of institutional collaboration, and misunderstandings that are evident there, it's all based on the lack of capacity in impact assessment. That is why we are not realizing all the things that we need to realize the value from impact assessment. And once we deal with this, we'll come to grips with the others, because that will be the forum for people to understand, for one institution to understand that impact assessment is there to serve their purpose, to help them in their decision-making processes, to help them in their permit decisions, and so on and so forth. And there'll be the openness and transparency in everything, and we can then realize the personal integrity Starch was talking about, see, when it comes to consultations and that kind of thing. So it's basically lack of capacity. That would be my number one, reforms. And of course, related to that, we can have the impact assessment regulations or policy, or regulations made into a national policy that makes a demand on every institution to comply with it in terms of their decisions, their mandates, and their respective actions. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. Okay. Is your one key action or reform?
Thank you, Irama. So, yeah, so beyond the institutional strengthening and all of that, so let me bring up an issue. Probably people on the call would probably rather help us with the solution. So at the bank side, our challenge is that we know that EPA is so strong when it comes to the environmental management regime. We know that even though EPA, I mean, if for any proponent, for any consultant, when you want to deal with any of these issues, assessment or such, you are going to EPA. It's just so clear. Even though we know that beyond EPA, there's Water Resources Commission, that also has a good role to play when it comes to water resources management. We know there's Forestry Commission, and we know that under the Forestry Commission, we could be dealing with biodiversity issues, we could be dealing with the forest and with fauna and all those things. But somehow we see that there's some good collaboration between EPA and all these other resource management institutions when it comes to the environment. Although, I mean, this is just to help us, understand the argument, because we all know that there's always a nexus between environment and social. But basically, when it comes to, these institutions with mandates to help manage environmental resources, it is just so easy for EPA to do that, right? But through the report, and these observations we picked from our reports that come to us through, on projects we are financing and all of that. On the social side, I know gender ministry would be very helpful with issues of child labor, with issues of children, with issues of inclusion, with issues of exclusion as well. Things like that. I know gender ministry has very, qualified officers to do that. But my question is, to what extent are they involved in the review of some of these documents or reports that are done through impact assessment? Are they given as much priority as we give the Forestry Commission, the Water Resources, Fire Service, all those guys? Is there a way we can bring them on board so that the social perspective can be heightened on our project? Same with which other social institution can I think of? Lands Commission. So the Lands Commission, for instance, because most of our projects, require the preparation of standalone resettlement action plans and all of that, we've seen that there's always been some bit of a challenge around the resettlement. Of course, also made complex by the fact that government usually doesn't even have the resources to implement the resettlement action plans that are being prepared. So what we are doing internally is to get some, what we call, let me say, some kind of a special approval from our regional vice president to have some specific project, use project resources to do compensations as well, so that we can have the project happen and have people benefit from the project. But the point is that to what extent are we ensuring that these PAPs, as Mr. Kwabena Didier referred to them, are being properly profiled? Beyond being profiled, there's another word I want to use, I've just forgotten. But basically, what are the steps to ensure through our ongoing, our current country systems, to ensure that these people are not left worse off? To what extent are we ensuring that fair and adequate compensations are paid? And so what we've seen happen is that on government projects, we all know you have to go through Lands Commission, but we've had ministries sometimes use individual consultant to do RAPs, and there's been a challenge where the consultants are not collaborating directly with the Lands Commission. So what we've done is to try and come up with some support for Lands Commission to support World Bank funded projects as well as other donor funded projects, so that the processes will be streamlined. We don't have to have one consultant bring RAP results for the government to now also go and validate, and it's an increased cost, and it also wastes time. It generates a lot of project delays. So these are things we are trying to solve. But the question really is, how best can we as a country also, do we need one big social institution like the EPA that would have the kind of focus EPA has on all environmental matters, despite the fact that there are other resource management institutions around? So sorry for not giving you a clear answer. It was just to get I know there are answers on this call. I know there'll be people who will be typing to probably help us navigate this issue, just as we have done with the environment side. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Okai. Mr. Bediabwa, please, your one key action or reform recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Only one. Yeah, okay. I will talk about maybe one, but I mean, a number of things in one. It's a strong regulator. We need a very strong regulator and a very strong regulator collaboration. If I say regulator, I'm not referring only to EPA, because there are competent or other competent authorities. For example, if there's a project in the energy sector, people in the energy ministry or the energy commission or what have you should be able to also collaborate well with EPA to be able to do the assessment. So we should have on all these regulators should be very strong, fearless. They should be given the free hand to operate without external interference. And then we need an effective and efficient practitioners. We need that kind of reform, effective and efficient practitioners. Now, everyone, I mean, anybody can wake up and then call himself, a consultant or a practitioner, and that is it. So this brings to fore the need for certification of the practitioners. You need to certify them, and then maybe like it's done for the lawyers and the doctors and what have you, every year or every 2 years, you need to go for some improvement courses or what have you for your certificates to be renewed, so that we can have an effective impact assessment system. And then also, in addition to this, we need very strong CSOs, which will do the advocacy when it comes to environmental and social impact assessment. But in all of this, as for the capacity building, it is very key for all the players in the environmental and social assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we have really exhausted the topic for discussion today. Thanks to our very experienced and knowledgeable panelists. And so we will now move into the Q&A session. I have seen that there are some questions in the chat box, and so I will start with those questions. If you have any more questions, I also see that there's a hand up for a question. So if you would like to ask a question, please raise your hand and then you'll be called and then we have your question answered. And so from the chat box, we have a question from Moses Otim, who is joining us from Uganda. Moses says, strategic environmental assessments and environmental and social impact assessment. What is the timing? How relevant to planning and decision making? How do we regain relevance, especially given the current needs and development agenda? I think this is a very good question. He's asking the timing of the impact assessments in the project planning phase or in the project planning process. Mr. Amoyawase, would you like to answer this question?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So we're looking at SCA and then the ESIA or EIA and timing and the project planning phase. Well, first, there's a need to distinguish between the two so that we don't confuse ourselves. I think Bedu said this from the beginning, that the SCA is the assessment tool for policy, program, and plans. If you like, you can add strategies and all that. Okay, and these usually occurs at the strategic level. And then when we come to the project level or development level activities, that is where we talk about the impact, the environmental and social impact assessment and the like. So, and the concept is this, that these things, whether policy formulation, whether planning, whether ASIA, EIA, they must be carried out at the early stages of the particular development or policy or action. You see, sometimes it is difficult to specify exactly where the starting point is. I remember Bedu said, for instance, that at the pre-feasibility stage, you have to consider the environmental implications, environmental and social. At the feasibility stage, so pre-feasibility, feasibility, and the design. You see, so this is it. Depending upon the type of project, and you see, projects differ from one to the other. So and developments come up. You know, people conceive developments and various actions at different times, and depending upon when they get funding and so on, they can then approach consultants for support in the particular assessment they have to carry out. Okay, so if you take, for instance, a policy, what I would say is as soon as the general concept of the policy is known, is developed, that is the stage at which you can, you can initiate the strategic environmental assessment. Okay, once the concept is formulated, once the concept is known, once you can lay hands on, the features of a particular concept or policy or plan or program, that is the stage at which SEA must be carried out. If it's a project, once you have that concept, I want to develop what is it? An industrial whatever, or a tourist facility, or health, whatever. Once you have the concept, once you have an idea of where it's likely to be located, okay, that is the time to initiate the environmental assessment study, okay, at very early stages, so that if there are any challenges, then you can consider alternative locations and so on and so forth. But you don't wait till you have made all the decisions, you have decided on where the location is going to be, and you have virtually completed all the various decision makings, and then you bring in the impact assessment. That will only decorate it for you, but you will not derive any benefit at all from it, because it's not going to influence any of the decisions that must form the foundation of the particular development. So that is what I can say about this. That as far as possible, you must consider impact assessment at the early stages of your planning of the development action. Thank you.
Can I add on to what Mr. Mayor just said?
Yes,
Hello.
please.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, here when we talk about impact assessment, we want to measure change, and the change is the difference between the baseline and then the intervention. Okay. So if you introduce an action before you start the process, you miss out on the baseline. So you must always carry out the assessment before, whether it's a policy or environmental and social impact assessment, before you introduce an intervention, so that you'll be able to measure that change. So you have to do the assessment before you hit the ground. That's what I want to add. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Budiebwa. There's a second question, which is along the same lines as this, from Sheba Indajire. I hope I didn't butcher your name. He or she is an environment practitioner from Uganda, and is asking, how do we steer ESIA to be started before design when EIA regulations require designs to be submitted along with ESIS? And I think Mr. Okine has attempted to answer that question in the chat, but if you would kindly like to elaborate on that, please.
Hello. So, on this specific question, I would like Mr. Muyawase or Mr. Bidu Yebua to attempt. They will give you the gospel truth. Thank you.
This, what? Come again with the question, Ura?
So the question says, how do we steer ESIA to be started before design when EIA regulations require designs to be submitted along with the ESIS? That is along with the reports.
That is a wrong approach. You can have the concept, a concept design, but you cannot have a complete design. I mean, being submitted with the EIA, because if the EIA is not able to influence your design, then it's not. Well, there's the possibility that the EIA will influence your design. There are so many examples. So you must complete the process before you complete your design. Any design that is submitted alongside with the EIA, maybe it's a concept design, but not the real design. So you have to go through the whole process and let the regulator, take the decision before you complete your design. Thank you.
Okay, thank
And
you.
just to add, that's it. I mean, what Bedu said. You see, there's no way, unless perhaps the idea is that you will do the impact assessment earlier, and then that goes to influence the design. Okay, so at the time you are submitting whatever the design, I don't know who you are submitting the design to, then you also submit the impact assessment. But that is not what happens in practice. Because in practice, the impact assessment goes to perhaps the environmental regulator, not necessarily the design. Because the environmental regulator would not be, in the Ghanaian situation, the EPA would not ask you for your detailed design at all. Their interest will be in the environmental assessment, which they will review and approve. And the assumption is that that is what is going to influence the final designs for the project. Okay.
So if I may add on quickly before Irama, you move on. So because I see a lot of questions. So I think the questioner is also coming from the perspective of what then are you even assessing if you don't have a design? But I think just to also buttress what my bosses have said, there must be some preliminary design that has been thought through, that is being considered, because it's on that basis that you are going to superimpose that on the existing baseline conditions for you to be able to now determine the potential risks and all of that. Yes, so the questioner is I can understand his frustration. If you are required to submit the designs as part of the report, it is because the design is what is being assessed as part of the assessment. So if you don't have a design, you don't have a project, but you may have already started some preparatory phases. So for those of us online who probably are in the financial sector, there are other forms of environmental assessment. But once you say environmental and social impact assessment, then it's definitely have to be specific. Things must have been, definite at the time of the assessment. So what we do quickly at the bank is that we prepare projects for government. And this project must comply with a country partnership framework that is prepared for 4 to 5 years. The current one is about expiring, so one will be prepared with the new government. Now, this is what helps us to prepare projects in all sectors. So if there's a project to be done in agric, you start with the identification of the project. You are going through some initial discussions with potentially a Ministry of Food and Agriculture or an agency, and MOFA, an MDA, and MOFA probably will be implementing maybe it's an irrigation scheme project that we want to do. So then GIDA will be involved as an implementing agency under the bigger Ministry of MOFA, right? So we identify the project, we prepare the project, we appraise the project, we then go on to negotiations, we do implementation, we complete. Now, what we do is that at each stage of our project financing cycle, you do some form of assessment. But what you do will be determined by how much information is available at what stage. So usually at an identification stage where you don't have a design, where you don't even know the locations and all of that, we promote the use of the framework document. And so one of my bosses spoke about the concept. At that phase, there must be some concept that you're looking at. So we subject that to a framework, approach. And then when we move on to, identification and we are moving on to appraisal, at appraisal, you must have had designs ready. So what we do is that it's more like a graduated approach of environmental assessment or environmental and social impact assessment. But of course, I mean, to be technically correct, you cannot call what we do at an identification stage, where you're probably looking at pre-feasibility and all those things. You cannot call them an impact assessment. You will call them other things. And depending on which institution you're working with, which country you're working with, they may have different terminologies for that. So that's just the perspective I wanted to add on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. So before we move on, I'd just like to say that I mean we have come to the end of the time that we allocated for this webinar. However, we see that there are still some questions that people want to ask. I see a few hands up. And so we will just allow for about 10 minutes to answer the remaining questions, and then we will be done with the webinar. And so the next question says that in contexts where data is limited or unreliable, how do you maintain the integrity and credibility of your assessment results? And I see that there has been some attempts to answer this question. And one response, which is coming from the former Deputy Executive Director Technical at the EPA, Mr. Ebenezer Apasampong, who says you need to indicate the data limitations and how it's impacted the impact assessment. In some cases, the data is just not available and you have to make some decisions. So thank you, Mr. Sampong, for that. If you are still on the call, Mr. Sampong, we would like to hear from you, a few words from you, if you're on the call, regarding that answer.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. And first of all, congratulations for such a wonderful webinar. I think that we need a whole day for this conversation. Maybe Ms. Amoase can lead us in this regard. I still think that there's more to explore on this subject. Perhaps we could also have to hear the proponents too, why they perceive this as a permitting, just a permit. They are focused on permits. We need to hear from them, and then maybe the regulators on the other side. But I think it's something that we can work together to bring it to pass. With respect to the issue of the data, I mean, we live in an environment where we just don't have the data, and sometimes what you have may not be enough for you to make a very conclusive judgment, but you still have to do something with it. Maybe you could use some proxies, some case studies, some expert judgments. And that is the beauty of this too, and justify why you are doing that. And perhaps in the course of implementation, additional data can be collected and then used to guide the implementation of the conclusions of the EIA. So I do not necessarily think that inadequate data is an impediment, but if you have it, it helps. You have to be more innovative to be able to do the assessment. My other issue has to do with, I even indicated that we have a situation where sometimes I think there's too much writing, large reports, but they don't transit onto the ground. So the transition from the reports to the action, there are issues. We write nice reports, we approve them, they are good. but they don't get translated onto the ground. So we need to work on how to do this. The other issue is also where, so that for me, that the first one is on the side of the proponent. The second one is on the side of the regulator. The regulator now is in a situation where you have to regulate to survive, financially. So the EIA process is now the cash cow. So that is also posing a big risk to the entire EIA system. The focus is, let's get the permit out there, increase our revenue. But beyond that, you have to take the follow-up actions, or even ensure that the EIA process is done well. So that is some conversation that I think we should engage one another to be able to sanitize the system. So basically, these are my two key contributions to the entire project. But great webinar. Thank you so much for the panelists for their contributions. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you,
Let me
Mr.
just
Sam.
add to just a minute.
Okay.
Let me add to Mr. Sampons. Eben, thanks for joining. Thanks. Yeah. With limited data, what I know the EPA would do, for instance, is that, of course, you have to make your decisions all the same. But what they will do is, as part of the permit conditions, they would emphasize the need for you to do continuous monitoring.
Yeah.
In the particular area, so that you can now come to terms with the realities of the decisions that you made.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that if there are any need for remedial action, any need for changes, then you will be informed later in the project processes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the little contribution I want to add.
Okay. So let me also add something small. I mean, in environmental assessment, there are two types of data. We have the primary and then the secondary data. You collect primary data when there is no secondary data. So if there is no data, you can collect the data, you can collect primary data. But if you have a reliable data which is current enough, then you fall on the secondary. So if you don't have secondary data and you can afford, you have to collect a primary data to fill that gap. I think that is the process. But again, even if you are not able to do that, you can also talk to people. It depends on the type of data that you are looking for. People who know much about the area where you want to have you can talk to them, and the data that you collect it's a primary data, but maybe it's not written in books, but what people know from that area. So there are various ways you can get data to do your assessment. Thank you.
Irama,
Okay.
just a quick bite. I know you agree with me that we'll close at 12, right? So just
No,
a quick
we are
bite.
closing before 12.
Really? I think you should do a poll. People are happy to have us respond to your question. So just a quick one. I have always wondered why we can't use a very creative process to reduce the cost for people doing impact assessment by doing something with the baseline situation. So I've seen projects over 50 different projects that have been done within Accra, right? And almost everybody, depending on the sector, would have to conduct some baseline studies. I was thinking, wouldn't it be more useful that for every report that has been submitted within a particular period, we find some money, get some young graduates to pull all these data together and have this data validated and make it available freely to everybody, so that we don't have people, because of course, I mean, there will be times that we need to generate some primary data based on how long ago the data was analyzed and put on the EPA website. But I've been thinking, is there a way we can have these data, put together by somebody in EPA, validated, so we know that these are, very reliable results or data that we can use in our analysis. I think to a good extent, it would serve as a great monitoring tool for the EPA within particular jurisdictions where these information exists. And then people can also rely on it so that we don't always have to, everybody is doing their own noise monitoring, everybody is doing their own. I know Moyi has something to say, but this is just thinking aloud. So Moyi, please.
Yes, Governor. In fact, this point you're raising is a bigger one, because
Wow.
you see, it's so important because it's a whole project that I believe the EPA one day must come to terms with it. Assuming that EPA has collected this data and continues to do the air quality monitoring, in, let's say, Accra or in some of these areas, and the project is coming up there, why would the consultant have to undertake the laborious, duty of collecting all this data only for the assessment? Meanwhile, if we have a database that we are building, we can guide this data collection and then feed them into the national database. Okay, so we have a firm one that others can rely on, you see, so that even if it means that EPA is selling this data to prospective, the consultants that come around, I think it's better than EPA selling environmental services, as Ebenezer was saying, because that one is no go at all. To sell environmental services, it means something else. So, Kobna, this is a project that we will have to interrogate later. I don't know what Bedu has to say about it, but it's something that we have to push for. Okay. Thank you.
Well, it's a good idea, but again, the data Kwabena referred to is there. The documents are in the library. If you're a consultant, you can just walk in to go and assess the reports and then collect the data for free. But maybe you are talking about trying to pull all together in one database. Yes, that one I agree. But if as a consultant you are doing a project in a particular area and you want the baseline data, and you know that someone has done an assessment from that, within that area, you can get a document from EPA and then you can use it as a secondary data. But as Moise, if you want to aggregate them, pull all of them together, then you need a lot of resources to be able to do that, and then come up with it. But this, in fact, sometimes the data that maybe Project A use may not be useful to another project. It depends on the impact, and then the location, and then there is receiving environment and what have you. So we need to be very careful if you are using a secondary data. For example, air quality, where we talked about, air quality can change any time. Maybe the air quality for Harmattan could be different from the wet season, and so on and so forth. Water, if you are doing water quality, the river is flowing. So data that Project A collected may not be useful when you maybe the 2 years later you also want to do water quality. So it has to be handled in a very special manner to be able to get the value that we seek to achieve. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we'll have time for just two more questions. I see that there are two hands up. Dennis Lamte has had his hand up for a while now. So Dennis, please unmute yourself and ask your question. If
Thank
you're
you
still.
thank you very much, Iriama. I just want to ask this question. I think from our earlier speakers, we understand that most clients or most proponents who want to undertake any project basically do the EIA because of permit. Now, my question is, we know that EPA, which is Environmental Protection Authority, they are in charge of the protection of the environment, public health, and everything. And I also know that after the EIA maybe basically has been submitted to EPA, EPA looks at the EIA and then provides, let's say, the proponent or let's say the client with some kind of permit and permit schedule conditions. Now, if we want to use EIA as a sustainable tool for development, I believe that EPA, who is the regulator, has to enforce certain rules or make sure that the conditions that have been spelled out to these clients are followed thoroughly. An example, I observed one permit schedule condition from a thermal plant where EPA is requesting them to do greenhouse gas accounting and estimation. And I believe it is a good thing. So my question is, why is EPA? Can't we have something like, let's say, an EPA police or within the EPA as an institution, ensuring that where there are areas of influence or impact, EPA will ensure through the permit schedule conditions that these clients are following it thoroughly. Because if this same EIA is given to IFC or World Bank, before the funding and other thing comes, World Bank and other funders will ensure that the things that they have asked you to do, you are following it thoroughly. So if we want EIA to be a sustainable tool for development, I believe EPA as a regulator and the main authority for the protection of the environment and public health, they have to ensure that the conditions that are given to these clients for their permits to be valid has to be followed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Do you respond?
Yes, any response?
Okay, Salamte, you are right. If every permit comes with a schedule, then the schedule is supposed to direct the proponent as to what the proponent should do to ensure that the development is sustainable. But as you rightly said, the regulator has the responsibility to monitor to ensure that that is done. So I must indicate that it is one of the weaknesses of our system. Monitoring it by the regulator is not the way it should be. For me, and I've been, the sample is there online. I will go for more of monitoring than submission of management plans from proponents. As a regulator, you have that responsibility to continuously monitor and then get to ensure that the project, whatever you ask the proponent to do, the proponent is done and done properly. So you're right. So we need to strengthen that aspect of the regulator. That is the Environmental Protection Authority. It's one of the gaps or the weakness of that institution. Thank you.
Okay, let me just add something to it, or perhaps create more confusion there. You see, this is the tendency of making EPA become a supra organization. You know, a very you know, a very huge organization that is doing everything. Okay, that is one line to go, but that is a line that I believe it may not be very, very successful. We may not be able to get there in the foreseeable future. Rather, I would, as I said during the presentations, that the need for impact assessment to be made a policy and a demand on every institution. So, for instance, the example you cited, okay, we don't have EPA doing everything, but we have the relevant institutions. If it is Energy Commission, if it is Petroleum Commission, if it is Minerals Commission, if it is Water Resources Commission, if it is, they also have their specific mandates and their roles. And impact assessment becomes a demand on them. Okay, so EPA even can sit in a position where they require Energy Commission to provide the permit condition would also require Energy Commission to do certain things. Okay, will require the Forestry Commission to do certain things, will require the Wildlife Division to do certain things. If, for instance, a project is located in a sensitive or let's say in a Ramsar area, okay, so EPA does not overstretch itself to an area that Wildlife Division, for instance, has the competency and has the managing obligation for that area. You see, so there must be that specialization and division of labor. Okay, and this is This can be achieved where the institutions are collaborating, sharing intelligence, and working together. That's the way I think in future we ought to go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for those responses. I think Aaron has his hand up. Aaron, please unmute yourself and ask your question. And then after you will take one last question.
Okay, thank you, Rama. Probably I'd have to respond to change my tack and respond to Mr. Amoyal's last comment. You see, over time, we've come to realize that EIA takes central stage in almost everything we do. So probably above and beyond this level, we may have to push it to the ministerial level to ensure that all state institutions that are required, because most of them would ask for an EPA approval before they proceed to do what they do. So why wouldn't they then have to work hand in hand with the EPA? Probably we have to lift it up to the ministerial level and push for a situation where we kind of, coordinate. To achieve the real value of IA as we are talking about. It's an area that's been left, and I think is even beyond our level. We need to take it to the, maybe push a paper to the minister if they would understand what we are talking about and try to push it in that direction. It might take time, but we will eventually get there. The other thing I wanted to talk about is about Kwabna's point about probably expanding the scope of EIA to include more social considerations like compensation and resettlement, which is hanging somewhere in there. We are not sure where it sits. Gender inclusion, vulnerability assessment, child labor, etc. It mainstream them into EIA. I don't know what the new law coming is saying about that, but I think it's something we worth looking at. Finally, I think it's unfortunate there's no EPA director or executive here, but I think a lot of the issues that we have raised here rest at the door of the EPA. They need to do a lot more public education. We were talking about proponent should. There's no proponent here. And who is a proponent? Businessman today can become a proponent tomorrow because you get a business. So the ordinary guy wouldn't listen to these things until he's about to do his business. And then he realizes that these things are there. So the EPA must do, now that it's an authority, they must do more public education, informing people about what EIA environmental permits about. People think is a cheat. You come, you pay for it, and they stamp it fine and you take it away. They need to do a lot more public education so that it will work well for everybody and all of us will get the real value of IA. I had more to say, but time is right now, so thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Aaron, for your contribution. So we'll take a last question from Mr. Sampong. I see his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Rama, for this. First of all, I just want to note that we have quite a number of people, over 80 participants on this call. And I invite those who are not members of the Ghana Association, the affiliate of the IIA, to join. I think if we have all of you on, we can do a lot. So I'm just borrowing this platform to publicize. We can give you more information. When you contact Rama, she will give you more information on how to join, since I'm using the platform, or link you up with Vaida, who is our executive officer for Ghana affiliate. The second thing is that yesterday, the EPA launched an online environmental quality monitoring platform with a private company who the intention is that they would establish a system where there will be real-time monitoring of emissions and other discharges from industries in Ghana. So maybe you can look out for the information, what the platform is supposed to do. This will help actually to a very large extent to gather a lot of information, which can be packaged properly for future data, baseline data initiative. So that is something I thought I should bring to this conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sampong, for that contribution.
Irama, if I may, just something briefly. I know we can't answer it here, but just to ask. So when I was preparing for this meeting, I was asking myself, impact assessment, are we looking, in terms of scope, are we looking just what we call impact assessment, location specific, design specific, and those things? Or are we also looking at probably some other forms of, because we've said we use impact assessment to inform, designs, to help make decisions, to plan. But I also realized that EPA has supported a lot of the integration of some of these, environmental and social issues into planning. So even in the medium-term development plans and the rest, our government are doing something. I just thought we should probably expand the scope, look at all these things that I've been doing. When you go into the financial sector, we now have the sustainable banking policies. And you have, banks who are trying to integrate ENS considerations into their banking processes and all of that. I didn't want to touch on that now because I know we didn't have time, but I just wanted to find out, is this something that we probably could discuss at another occasion? How EIA, not necessarily EIA, how impact assessment or ENS considerations are actually being integrated into other aspects of the Ghanaian economy that we probably haven't looked at. We will not necessarily call it impact assessment, but people are doing ENS due diligence. People are doing ENS screening before transactions are finalized. They are doing some form of ENS appraisal before credits are, before credits are concluded on the national institutions. They are doing some level of integration into the national policies. NDPC is doing quite a lot in that area. So that was just for me to, I just thought I should mention it, that people on the call who are from those other sectors don't think that we didn't have time for them. We probably will find time another day. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. That's a very key point that you have made. I think we will have other webinars. In fact, our next webinar will be in September. And so we will be having webinars on this, and we'll expand the scope as you have recommended to include all of these different perspectives as well. Okay, so I think we've gone quite past the time that we allocated for this, but just to wrap up and also to say thank you very much for the interaction from all the participants. The chat box has been quite busy, which makes me very happy as a moderator. So thank you all for your participation and for your questions and comments. And so just to wrap up, we'd like to take just final thoughts or final words from each of our speakers, just to summarize, and then we will make way for people to join other meetings that they have on their schedules. So starting with you, Mr. Okain, and then we'll get to Mr. Bedu, and then finally Mr. Ameawase. Thank you.
Hello, sorry, Irama. Sorry. So I was reading the chat and lost you. So I think those would, my final comment would be what I just shared. I know I've taken much of the time already, so thank you. So those were my final comments. So I'll leave it to my bosses. Thank you.
Good. I think that has been a very good exercise, and as Mr. Sampong said, we should be, looking at expanding this and then also improving on the frequency of this exercise. So, Mr. Amir, maybe you have to think about that. What I'll say is that as stakeholders, we must all adhere to the core values and the principles of IA if you want to develop in a very sustainable manner, and also have at the back of our mind that the survival of mankind depends entirely on the health of the environment. So we must understand that the damage that is done to the environment will eventually affect the population who depend on it, and therefore we must do everything possible to safeguard the environment in order to ensure that the continuous survival of, in order to ensure the continuous survival of mankind. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bedu. Mr. Amoyawase, your final thoughts, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bedu. Yes, we'll consider this. I mean, we'll have to make it more frequent, Rama, than perhaps we envisage it. Yes, I just want to emphasize the importance of impact assessment and the fact that this is a preventive tool. The unfortunate thing, or the fortunate thing, is that because it's a preventive tool, a lot of bad case projects never even get to see the light of day. Okay, so we don't get to know. If we were to know, we would then appreciate its importance and the value that it delivers to development. But for instance, when we see cases like the Atomic Junction explosion killing a number of people, if you see the Apiace explosion killing a lot of people, then we must begin to ask questions. Is impact assessment failing us, or we are failing impact assessment? Because accidents can happen, but with the impact assessment, we do not expect casualties, to be that many. Okay, so my final word will be that we should commend impact assessment and EPA for their role so far, and we have a number of examples of cases where impact assessment has saved the country, has saved communities, has saved society. If you take, for instance, let me give you two examples. If you take, for instance, the thermal power plant, the Aboasi thermal power plant, originally of the VRA, and in relation to thermal water discharge, hot water discharge, and this was going into the fishery-sensitive coastal area, and impact assessment brought it out. You see, and therefore alternatives had to be decided on, and then this led to the selection of air cooling towers instead of just hot water discharge into the coastal environment. Unfortunately, the consequence is that we had to now begin to pay higher tariffs, electricity tariffs, because we made a decision and we're not ready to change the location. Okay, so you see, when impact assessment comes a bit later than the project planning and development, it can lead to cost, mitigation costs, and then this can be passed on to us and many, many others. There was a university proposal, a university development proposed to be located in the Kweshin Lagoon area. And they heeded the screening decision of inappropriate siting and accordingly relocated to a more spacious area. And today, they are giving testimony for that decision by EPA to get them to relocate. And many things. So the importance of impact assessment cannot be underrated. Unfortunately, capacity gaps. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for all of your contributions. And once again, thank you for joining this webinar. Please interact with us on our social media handles. You can find us on LinkedIn at the Center for Environment and Health Research and Training. We also have a YouTube channel where we will be uploading recordings of all of our webinars so that you can catch up on. We'll also share the recording to all of our participants as well in the days to come. And so thank you once again, and we hope to see you on our next webinar. Have a very good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.